Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, and for you it should be December 22nd, so happy holidays. Hopefully you're enjoying break. It's Monday, which means it's time for a Monday morning meta report. The usual disclaimers here, though one slight addition. The first line normally says these reports are based on early experiences and some internal data. Wanted to note here that this is mostly my personal viewpoint at this point. I haven't really reached out and talked to like the other live team members or anything. They're on break. I didn't really want to bother them. So this is mostly going to be around what I saw looking at our internal data and stuff like that. And based on what I've played, I played a bunch today to try to catch up. But yeah, otherwise, usual disclaimers here. Anything included in this report doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be acting on it. And data only tells us what is. And I will say, in particular, this patch, we are seeing some meta shifts, people discovering new comps, things like that. So pretty nice. So overall, doesn't necessarily mean things are solved, just is what is. Okay. On the champs and traits side, what I'll say is a positive here is that there's a decent mix of like Fast 9, level 8 stuff, and reroll comps being played right now, right? Reroll's got things like Tryndamere and Ashe, level 8's got things like Diana, Yunara, and Fast 9 has various legendary comps that you can play, which is really good. That's awesome. There are lots of different things you can play. Anyone who says it's just Fast 9 or anything like that is wrong. That being said, we would like to see a few more reroll options out there besides Ashe Tryndamere. Ashe Tryndamere is kind of the big one, and we'll talk about it a little later, but Bard has mostly fallen out of favor as a reroll enabler, which isn't great. So some work to do there in the reroll space for sure still, but at least there's something out there. Next up, there's still too many champs that really aren't hitting the bar in terms of power. Now, the good news is we have 100 champs, so if there's a couple that aren't really hitting the bar, it's not going to ruin the set quite as much as it would have in the past. But that being said, doesn't really mean it's okay, right? And this is pretty much all the Zon champs for the most part, just because they're all really struggling right now. LeBlanc, Gwen, Ziggs, some examples out there. You can probably think of a couple others, maybe Malzahar or stuff like that. But definitely a few that really aren't hitting the bar, which kind of stinks. The same is true of vertical traits. Now, verticals are meant to be lower cap. It's not like we need, 7 Demacia to be out there winning games all the time. But there's definitely still that are struggling, some that are struggling to find a place. Stuff like Zon, obviously. Noxus, you don't really see much Noxus past 3. Shadow Isles has actually even mostly fallen out of favor for the most part here. And then I'm putting Piltover here, knowing that Piltover's on the rise a bit. But even like 6 Piltover and some of the best T-Hex comps aren't really playing 6 Piltover. So just some notes there. Now, the biggest issue that we're seeing, though, I think right now, if you look at the current meta, is that the things that are tough to play aren't really worth the effort compared to the standard reliable lines, right? These are Void has mostly become pretty reliable, Bilgewater, things like that, Freljord, whatever. But some of the more difficult things to play, like Ishtal, Nidalee, Aurelion Soul, Galio, Rise, Thresh, things that are kind of harder to get, just aren't really worth it compared to something simple like a Kindred, And so I think that's kind of a big miss here, especially on like the Aurelion Soul Rise side of things. But even like Brock, for example, Brock doesn't really live up to the effort compared to, say, something like a Volibear or things like that. Now, I know Challenger players are going to see Ishtal. They're going to buff Ishtal. And Ishtal is going to be a really tricky one, I think, because right now, I think Ishtal is perfectly balanced, but it's actually not that fun. And again, the payoffs don't really seem worth it. But doesn't necessarily mean we're acting on it or anything. And I know there's definitely some people who believe the Ishtal augment is OP, but this is kind of what we're seeing, though, is just you go out of your way to play something like an Aurelion Soul or a Rise, and it just isn't worth it. So one more thing I wanted to add here before we go on to augments. Level 9 and 10, we're generally seeing, I think, if you look at this, current meta overall, it's just a bit too easy to hit these levels quite early. We're seeing things like level 9 on 4-2. I've seen level 10 on 4th, 3. There's certain augments that are causing this growth mindset, not max level win out. That's not really great. And this is leading to a lot of problems where things that we meant to be rare, like Baron, are just way too common. And then they feel like just a normal thing when they're supposed to be pretty rare, which isn't great. We're also even seeing things like Bard, which was meant to be a reroll enabler, now being played to just, you put him in Fast 9 and then use all those rolls you banked up, which isn't great either. And so definitely what we're going to need to do, whether it be 16-2 right when we get back, which will be tough because branch cuts already happened, or 16-3. But either way, there's likely going to have to be some thing to address how easy it is to get 9 and 10. This could be XP cost. This could be econ augments, things like that, general resources. But overall, I would say we're just not really happy with how frequently it's happening and how early it's happening specifically. So, all right, Portable Forge. This is just a general update, as I said I'd give you for artifacts. Currently, it's below 4.4 at all stages, which is good. It means Portable Forge and artifacts aren't really a problem. I did want to call out specifically that it's getting a little close at 2.1 right now. Looking at the data in high elo today at 2.1, it was at 4.45, which again, balanced. That's not a problem, but just something to keep an eye on as we look into that. It still gets weaker as the game goes on. 3.2 is like 4.5 something, and 4.2 is like 4.6 or something. But generally, it's still the most picked augment by a pretty substantial margin at all elos. So overall, this data is fine. That being said, I think part of this is the benefit of this is Tryndamere. I think Tryndamere, who benefits from particular artifacts, is actually inflating the stats a little bit. And so if Tryndamere were to get nerfed, I'm not saying he is, I'm just saying if he does, that might hit Portable Forge. So there might still be work to do here. And as we called out in the last morning meta report, stuff like Living Forge is not really great right now. So that's kind of a good sign, or not a good sign, but a sign that we might need to do some work to artifacts. All right, on the augment side, on the high elo side, we're actually getting really close. In the top 2% of players, Golden Egg is still number 1. So again, that's a good sign. Big one that rose to the top here this patch, and I was kind of worried about this, but Hexgate Travel, which is the Piltover one that gives you units, way too good. This enables you to get a 3-star Caitlyn or a 3-star Orianna pretty reliably, which allows you to then feed it to the T-Hex, get the T-Hex reliably, which makes the difference. I've talked about this a lot when I play a lot of Piltover, but the difference between a T-Hex eating a 2-star and a T-Hex eating a 3-star is way too big right now. That makes a massive difference. A T-Hex eating a 3-star can win games pretty easily, and this augment just enables it too much. My personal opinion is this augment can't exist with a T-Hex in a balanced state. So we'll see, but we'll see what the augment team comes up with on that. Other ones are ones that have been at the top for a while. Awakened Soul, that's been a really strong one for a while. Bronze for Life 2, which we already talked about, we're reworking next patch to go from durability to armor and MR. Level Up, still showing a fast 9 meta. Same with Malicious Monetization. Expected Unexpectedness, this is one that if it's at the top, we're pretty happy. So we actually look at that one as a good standard. Birthday Reunion, this one's getting a slight nerf next patch anyway. Jarvan Shyvana has actually risen back up in high elo, which is pretty surprising. And then that's actually the line. Remember we talked about like our 4.2 to 4.8 mark. That's actually the line at high elo. But I did want to call out Bandle Bounty Plus. The reason I want to call out this one is it is in that 4.2 to 4.8 range, but it has a ridiculous win rate. A win rate that I'm not comfortable with personally. Looking at the stats, can't say the number. But this augment is winning out a lot. That makes me nervous, so we'll probably have to look into that. So just calling that one out, even though it's technically not within the range. And then for bottom 90% of players, as we talked about, the elos are going to be different, or the metas will be different between elos. We see a lot of what we saw last time, which is vertical enablers, and particularly Demacia seems to be doing very well because you see Demacia Forever, the Jarvan Shyvana duo, and the Lucian Vayne duo all being really, really strong. Silco's Revenge does particularly well in bottom 90%, which again is surprising given that Zaun is pretty terrible. So probably some work to do there. Hexgate Travel, Awakened Soul, Malicious Monetization, Expected Unexpectedness, all really strong in both elos. This one surprised me looking at the data, but Early Learning is actually good in low elo. Who'd have thought? Generally, I guess 1-cost rerolls are pretty playable in low elo. Golden Egg, Going Long. This is one that, continues to be quite good. Part of the level 9, level 10 thing we talked about is like Going Long and Hustler probably need to be reworked in like 16.3. And then Thorn Plated Armor, which has fallen out a little bit in high elo, but still in low elo, still doing quite well. All right, underperforming augments. Not a lot has changed here. You're going to see a lot of the same thing, which is emblems, because guess what? We haven't fixed it yet. Crazy. Hard Commit, Flexible, Tactician's Kitchen, Cooking Pot, Trait Tree, and Spreading Roots, pretty much on both sides. On the high elo side, Ishtal Expeditionist. Again, this is one that probably is sitting exactly where it's supposed to be in data. The win rate and the top 4 rate for it look correct. And again, from what I've played, it seems correct. I'm sure there are high elo players that when they lose to it will call it BS and call it OP. But from what I can tell, this is where it's supposed to be. So I don't foresee it getting buffs and nerfs and things like that. Obviously, if the Ishtal trait gets buffs, it may need it. But like the augment's doing what it's supposed to, which is lets you play Ishtal. Cool. Other one to call out here I thought was interesting because maybe, you know, beating perception a little bit, but aura farming is actually really, really low right now. This could be a sign that there are too many outcomes in aura farming that are just bad, right? Like if you hit Zillion, or I don't know, what's another bad one? Maybe Shyvana, that you can't really build around, that maybe aura farming is underperforming. But seeing this one low is a little sad, especially because its pick rate is like 5x any of the other ones on this list. So it is a very popular one, but just noting that it's not doing well in high elo. On the low elo side, World Runes, like we talked about, this one will always seem to be bad, but at least it's not showing up in high elo anymore, which means it's definitely playable. Other ones, Dumbify, this is one that continues to be bad, though if it stays this bad, we probably just actually need to buff it. Recombobulator typically does bad in low elo. It's weird for me to see Treasure Hunt this low in low elo when early learning was good, but what do I know? But yeah, otherwise, and then Wild Growth, this is Yordle reroll not being very good in high elo, but it does really, really good in low elo, so some tricky stuff there. But yeah, this is kind of the augments. And again, you'll notice the list is shortening because things are starting to get within range, which is good. But yeah, this is, like I said, we haven't really addressed this, so if I do a Monday morning meta report next week, I imagine this will look pretty damn similar. All right, and then known bugs, couple new ones showing up here. Vagar still gets more AP from blue buff. Yordle can still mess with your shop UI. The Jinx bug, where she sometimes stops and isn't doing the right amount of damage at 3-star, that's getting rescripted in 16.2. Void Gauntlet seems to be doing less damage than intended. I'm not sure exactly how much less or what. It doesn't look like atrocious by any means, but sometimes it just doesn't do what it's supposed to. Warpath, this one's been around for a while, but I figured I'd call it out here because it's been coming up again. Warpath doesn't interact with ghost fights correctly. Sometimes if your ghost beats people, you'll gain points. Sometimes if you lose to a ghost, it does weird things with ghost fights, so just calling that out. And then this one actually happened to somebody in Paris, and I've seen one other person report it, but in very rare cases, Yasuo can revive if he's killed at the exact right frame in the middle of his spell. Obviously, we need to fix this, but just calling it out, if you've ever seen a reviving Yasuo, this is a known bug. Yeah. All right. There you go. That is the quick Monday morning meta report. Again, it's not exactly perfect by any means, and actually I'd be love to hear from any like challenger players out there, anything you've got that's different. But this is just generally my tendencies. Again, everyone else is on break, so you get what you get. But yeah. All right. That's going to do it for me this week. Hopefully you guys have fun. I got to finish my climb, and who knows, maybe I might even keep going. This game's a lot of fun, though. There's a lot of interesting games that happen. I'm enjoying it. But yeah. All right. That's going to do it for me. Again, happy holidays. Hope you have a Merry Christmas and things like that. That's going to do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.